Apple computers heading into 2024? Are we all just a little bit more confused than ever? Let me explain.
Is this really happening? I can't believe it's
Welcome back to
true.
the channel.
I'm just
So 2023 is just about over, and what a year it has been for Apple, right? We have tons of new systems that came out, and I'm going to get into those in a second. We have the M2 now competing with the M3 chips. We have all these different systems you can buy, including some M1s. So I think we're scratching our heads. We're all just a little confused, aren't we? Now what I want to do in this video is I want to kind of give you my year-end takeaways at the end of this video, kind of what I learned from 2023 and what I think people should be doing right now. So stay tuned for that. So without further ado, we're going to get into the video. What a year it's been. Okay, in 2023 we saw a ton of new Macs come out, including we saw the M2 Mac Mini, the M2 Pro Mac Minis come out, the 14 and 16-inch M2 Pro and M2 Max MacBook Pros came out, the M2s came out earlier this year. So we saw the M2 Studios with the M2 Max and the M2 Ultra chips, great for video editing. We saw the Mac Pro with the M2 Ultra chips, don't get that. Then we saw the 15-inch M2 MacBook Airs come out. Those are great systems overall, I love them. And then we saw the 24-inch M3 iMacs come out, very similar to this system, but I still like them. You can see why, I have one, right? And then actually finally they had the 14 and 16-inch M3, M3 Pro, and M3 Max MacBook Pros. So the M3 MacBook Pros and the M2 came out in the same year. So this is leaving us all a little confused in 2023 going into 2024. So I'm going to go through some of my takeaways here because it's just a lot to take in. All right, and then the year before that, we saw a whole line of M1 Macs come out, right? We had all the M1 line, including the most beautiful of all, the M1 MacBook Air right here. Everyone agrees, right? For the cost, it's a really good deal. Anyways, we saw all these things, and then we started watching videos this year. We watched all these different YouTubers and stuff, and I think we're really scratching our heads because we're seeing crazy results coming in on all these channels, and they're all different versions over 3 years, but we're seeing very similar results. Now, of course, it makes a difference if you have an Intel Mac now or you have an M1. What should you buy? Should you buy the M3? It really makes a difference on what you currently have, and we're going to get into that as well. All right, a little history on me myself. So I watch hundreds, and I mean hundreds of videos on Macs for my channel. I do a lot of research and stuff like that. So after watching all these videos, I'm kind of scratching my head myself, and I think everybody else is. So, benchmarks are one thing. We know that the M3s benchmark faster than the M2s faster than the M1s. This is like Cinebench and Geekbench and those type of scores. They're about 15 to 20% faster each year, and maybe the Cinebench is a little faster as well. We got ray tracing and stuff. But those things on paper mean one thing, but real world results mean another thing. So after going through hundreds and hundreds of hours of watching people, the thing I've noticed, and I think you have too, is people with M1s, sometimes you'll watch somebody and they'll blow away the M1 on something, but other times the M1 is very close or even beats the M3. So you're doing a video, you're watching someone do video edits or, when they actually render or they actually export the videos. And the export times are just as fast on an M1 than an M3. In another case, the M2 is faster than the M3. In another case, the M3 kills the M1. So all these different case studies are coming in, but we really don't know what's really going on. I mean, the benchmarks, again, are one thing, but real world use seems to be all over the place. It seems to be that they're all very close. I mean, the biggest change obviously was with the M1 series, then we went to the M2 series and the M3 series, but it looks like there's very little change between all three series unless you're doing very specific tasks, and it really depends specifically on what you're doing, and it's really hard to kind of nail down what you should buy. I mean, obviously the M1 should be slower than the M3s, but if they're, if you can get an M1 for $2,000 less than an M3 and a Max version or something like that, and the difference is only a couple seconds, then you should definitely buy the M1. So this is kind of what we're going to talk about. I think we're just all kind of watching these things and watching all these different videos. Then when you think one thing, you look at the other video and all of a sudden you're like, that doesn't make any sense. I think we're all in the same boat. I think some of the contributing factors to this is the M3 obviously has slower bandwidth memory than the M2 and the M1, or at least the M2. The M1s actually, the base models had faster SSD drives than the M2 and the M3 base models. I mean, all these things are combining to this crazy, Apple ecosystem right now where they're all great. I mean, don't get me wrong, these are all great systems, but whether you should upgrade or not, this is what we need to talk about. So I'm here to kind of provide a simplified version of what I came up with for the year, just some simple bullet points, and I hope it's going to help people. I mean, we all want that shiny space black, Mac that's coming out just came out a couple months ago or a month ago. We all want that, right? We see the YouTubers out there with 20 different, they seem like they're getting a new MacBook or something every 3 months, and they are. I don't know how they're doing it. And they have all these different Mac computers, and you think, maybe I should be doing this. Why are they doing it? I should be doing it too. The reality of the system, or the reality of the world actually, is we all have bills to pay. I mean, small YouTubers and everybody else, none of us have funds like that. I don't know where these people are getting their money, but we need to pay bills, we need to pay for school, we need to pay for a whole bunch of other things. So just don't waste your money, right? That's the way I look at it. So at the end of the day, while you see all these big YouTubers, obviously people like, big YouTubers like Marquise Brownlee and myself. Marquise Brownlee, he's not that big, right? Anyways, when we get this big, you know what I mean. We can afford this, right? I can't. But anyways, you get the idea. So if you can't afford it and I can't afford it, who's affording this? It's just the big YouTubers that get them sent to them, or they have the funds that they get from those. So don't think you have to upgrade unless you really need this. Unless you really make money off this kind of system, then you need to upgrade, and we're going to talk about that. All right, so here are my bullet points. Let's get into it. Number one, if you have an Intel Mac, you should upgrade. You should upgrade to an M2 or an M3 Mac, as far as the chip series. Now, I'm going to say a couple things here. The M1 is probably fast enough for you, but you might as well get the extra years of OS updates on the M2 and the M3, because right now the M2s are not that much more than the M1s. So overall, you should probably go up to the M2 or the M3s there. Obviously there's just so much going on where I can tell you should go to the M3 or the M2. I just can't. Look for the sales. If you can get a really good deal on an M2, get the M2. They're going to be very similar to the M3s, like I just said, and overall, there's almost no difference whatsoever for most users. So just keep that in mind. Just get the M2 if you can get a sale on it and be done with it, and don't worry about it. Now, if you can get a really, really good sale on the M1, really good, get that, because you're not going to notice a huge difference between the M1s and the M3s also. If you're coming from an Intel Mac, it's going to be a huge, huge difference for you, so just get one of them, but preferably get the M2 or M3, depending on whatever model you want and how much RAM you need and stuff, get that, and then be done with it. All right, if you're somebody that has an M1 system, M1 MacBook Pro, M1 MacBook Air, something like that, you don't need to upgrade to an M2 or M3. You're going to notice almost no difference. And there's a couple caveats to this, but overall, don't upgrade. Wait for the M4s or something coming out later. It's just not going to be worth it for your money. If you know that you're under, let's just say you know that you have too little of RAM and you're running into kind of a roadblock there with RAM, then you should upgrade to an M2, M3, upgrade the RAM, and then you can upgrade that way, because it makes it worth your while. But if your system's performing okay for you, the RAM's not an issue, and you don't need to go from an Air to a Pro or something because your job changed or something, just stick with the M1 or the M2 system. No need for you to upgrade to the M3. All right, I noticed that basically the M1 Pro chip, the M2 Pro chip, or the M3 Pro chip, whether it's a MacBook or whatever chips those come in, is good enough for almost all YouTubers. They usually come with at least 16 or 18 gigs of RAM, and they're going to be fine for just about every YouTuber just like me, and even Marquise Brownlee, though he's got the money to spend up on the Max, right? Or the Ultra even. But for most of us out there, just get the Pro, right? That's going to be good enough for everybody. Realistically, even the M1 and M2 MacBook Airs are just fine for everybody, even with some video editing, as long as you have maybe 16 gigs of RAM. 8 will even cut it. I'm just saying maybe for the future-proofing it, get the 16. But even those systems, if you're just doing light stuff and you're not making too much money from it, just stay there. The 15-inch MacBook Air is a great system for video editing if you actually upgrade the RAM on that. Again, you don't have to, but I recommend going up to 16. When you get into the situation where that's enough power for you, and it's a big screen like that, then you got to say, hey, wait a second, should I go up to the Pro or should I just stay with the Air? Really, it doesn't matter if you're getting enough out of it, right? So what I would say is the only situation where you kind of have to doubt yourself is if you're running low on resources or your CPU's kind of struggling. But for most of us, that's not the case. So you just have to go with your preference. Is the Air the preference where you have the bigger screen? A lot of people like that footprint. Or do you want to go with the 14-inch Pro, MacBook Pro, which actually has a better screen but smaller, but it's got a lot of extras like the ports and everything else, the better screen. Everything else combined makes that a better value. But overall, the Air is still a great system, and the MacBook Airs overall are just totally great systems, and probably for, like I always say, 90% of users, they're just more than fine. But at about $17.99 on sale, the MacBook M3 Pro, I guess it's around $17.99, but the 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M3 chip for $17.99 is probably the best value of the bunch. All right, so the next thing I learned is the M1, the M2, and the M3 Max chips. So the Max chips, like the M1, or let's just start with the M3. The M3 MacBook Pro with the Max chip, they're for professional users. Most YouTubers do not need this. They think they do. Most people, in music and stuff think they do, but they normally don't. So the Max users are for people that are actually making a good amount of money off of what they're doing with it. So if you're making money off it, you can justify the cost. You can get that Max. But again, stay away from it if you're really not, you're kind of struggling or you want to get into YouTube and stuff like that, because you're not going to really utilize that. You're going to spend a lot more. There's a big jump going from the Pro to the Max. So those are made for people that are making just a lot of money there. And overall, it's about $1,000 $2,000 jump, somewhere in that range. It's just not worth the money. You can buy a better camera, you can do a lot of other things with that, put it in the bank. Just don't get that unless you absolutely need it. Oh yeah, but if you can find an M1 Max, like an M1 MacBook Pro Max with the Max chip for about $2,000, and I've seen them out there. They're refurbished a lot of times, but I've seen them around $2,000. I even seen some new ones on B&H still. That's a great system. I mean, those are about $2,000 off, and the M1 system is just so fast with the Max chip in it. So if you can find one around $2,000 there, you can justify that cost, because now you're thinking it's up against the Pro version. Cost is about the same. So in that case, a couple years, I would go with the Max. All right, nobody should buy the Mac Pro. I think we've all agreed with that. If you do, I always said in the video before, you got to get a lobotomy. You shouldn't be getting one, shouldn't be looking at them. Just no Mac Pro, they're not worth it, all right? But if you're doing a lot of, if you have your own monitor and it's a monitor that you're happy with, you don't have to upgrade the monitor, then you want to go with, obviously, the Mac Studio is a great thing, and also the upgraded Mac Mini with the Pro chip is great for video editing as well. You're going to get a lot of RAM in those systems. You're going to get fast SSDs. They're just great overall if you have your own, if you have to have your own monitor though. That's the big caveat there. But never get the Pro. The Studio or even the Mac Mini with upgraded, specifications, the Mac Mini Pro. It's an incredible system there, and those are going to be able to handle any workload pretty much you throw at it for a fraction of the cost of the Pro. So those systems are great for video editors if you have your own monitor. So that's all I got to say on that. And just take a look. I mean, you can always find some really good deals, even on the Max chip for under $2,000 on the Studio. Totally worth it. iMacs, I love them. You can see I have one right here. Here's my thing on iMacs. Basically, the M1 and the M3 is faster, but not super noticeably faster, especially with 8 gigs of RAM. So you're going to have to kind of think about this for a second. If you can pick up an M1 iMac over here with upgraded RAM and an upgraded SSD on that thing for about the same cost as the M3, get the M1, all right? It's going to be a better machine for video editing. You're going to have a lot more RAM on it, faster SSD, all that stuff combined. It's going to be a faster system, I think, overall with all that kind of added stuff, all right? But if you're going to be going head-to-head and the cost is around the same thing, get the M3, obviously. But when you start upgrading them, it just depends on cost there because they're so close. It's one of those things you just got to keep your eyes open, but that's just kind of my take on this is, they're not that far apart right now. So if you can find an M1 at a good price with 16 gigs and 512 gigabyte SSD, pick it up. All right, another take is if you're just trying to get into the, the Apple ecosystem, the M1 MacBook Air right here is still a viable system, even in going into 2024. And also the Mac Mini M2, get the M2 there, $499 on sale. So for your student, things like that, perfect systems. I'm going to say this again. I always say you always get upgraded RAM on those things, but realistically, 8 gigs is plenty for most people. I'm just thinking of myself and people that do some little bit more stuff than just like email and stuff. But you can even do video editing on these machines just fine. You're going to wait a little bit longer and stuff like that. It might get a little more frustrating for you. But overall, these things can do it all. That's just, the honest truth. All right, the Studio display. It's expensive, right? Pick one up if you want the best 5K experience you can get right now for the money. Now, you really want to look for these on sale, so you can probably pick these up for around $1,400. This is my kind of take on this. Look for one about $1,400. I've seen them on Apple Refurbished store, directly on their store for about $1,350. That's a pretty good deal. Now, the Samsung, S9 Viewfinity came out, but it was like $1699 or $1599. Don't get that for that cost, but the street cost just dropped just recently to $999, which makes this, if you can get the Studio display for $1,350, I'd still get that. But now if it's $1,600 versus $999, you got to look at that Samsung monitor. I like, the glossy. I don't like the matte and stuff. There's some differences there. But overall, those are the two monitors you want to kind of look at if you want 5K. So is it worth it? If you're getting paid back, it totally is. And if you are going to use it long term, it totally is. So you tell me. Do you have one? Have you tried one? They're not the best monitors, only 60 hertz, but overall it's the best 5K I think you can get for the money. Okay, so there's my wrap up of everything for the year of 2023. I mean, I know it's kind of all over the place, but I just wanted to touch on some of the key things there. I mean, a lot of people are now asking me, should I go, going into 2024, should I wait for the M3 Airs or the M3 Airs and all this other stuff? I say don't. I mean, right now the sales are pretty incredible. Pick up the M2s now if you're looking for like either, an Air or a Mac Mini or a Studio. Just definitely pick those up because, I mean, realistically, there's not going to be, we already know the benchmarks. It's not huge differences like I just said. Just get the best price if you can justify the price there. It's not worth waiting if you need a computer now. Now, if you don't need it right now and maybe you're coming from an older M1 and you want to, go up to a 15-inch Air from a 13-inch or something like that, then maybe wait for the obviously I think it's March that they're going to be coming out with the M3 MacBook Airs, so maybe wait till then. But realistically, those 3 months is not worth it for other people because the sales are just too good right now, and there's just so many on B&H, Best Buy, Amazon, you name it, they're all good sales out there. So in the end, we're all still a little bit confused, right? And at the end of the day, I think that's Apple's overall plan, right? They want to confuse you. They want you always thinking, should you be buying the next best thing? Are you underbuying? Are you overbuying? That guy's got it. Should I get it? This is what they want, right? So don't fall into that trap. The M1s are just as good as the M3s for most people, and I would say 90% of people won't even notice the difference. You see all these benchmarks, you see all these shiny things online. These people are pushing these things beyond what you'll ever push them to. I mean, 8 or 10 layers of 4K, who cares? I've never used 8 or 10 layers of 4K. I use 2, 3 maybe. So at the end of the day, you got to consider all this stuff. Just don't get kind of tied up into everything. Get to what you want, have fun, be happy with it, and just don't worry about it. That's what life's all about. Don't always worry about it and move on. So we'll talk to you soon. That's all I wanted to say. We're wrapping up 2023. I might do one more video in 2023, so I might see you one last time. But if not, or if so, peace.